So welcome everyone to the April presentation of the Exchange, Vitality in Volunteering, and happy National Volunteer Month. I'm Sarah Butler, Senior Director of Corporate Engagement at CHC, Creating Healthier Communities, and I will be your moderator for today's conversation. I am especially excited to be joined by an amazing group of panelists who are ready to share their knowledge and expertise with all of you. Just to quickly go over today's agenda, I will kick us off with some brief introductions of our panelists, and then we will get right into the discussion. Finally, we will wrap up with a few minutes of open Q&A and any final thoughts. We know that volunteers are irreplaceable when it comes to fulfilling a nonprofit's mission. And volunteerism not only impacts the nonprofit and those that they support, but it also impacts the workplace itself. Companies report that engaged employees are happier, healthier, and perform at a higher level. Employees want the opportunity to volunteer with peers in corporate supported events and agree that when work and life blend and enrich each other, everybody wins. Through employee volunteer and skills giving programs, companies have the opportunity to help build nonprofit capacity and empower employees to give their time and talent. And all of this is good for the company's employee retention and bottom line. At the onset of the pandemic, in-person volunteering dropped dramatically, putting a strain on already strained nonprofits. However, the virtual landscape brought a new vitality to volunteering. So what does the future look like for companies and nonprofits when it comes to volunteerism? Let's hear from our panelists. Joining me today are Veronica Crowe, who's the manager of philanthropic giving at the Epilepsy Foundation. Veronica has worked with the Epilepsy Foundation for 3 years. She has participated as a volunteer for multiple organizations for many years and served on the board of directors for the Epilepsy Foundation of Texas. Jordan Quayle is VP of Community Engagement with Ronald McDonald House Charities, Upper Midwest. Jordan is a tenured nonprofit professional with both national and local nonprofit organizations. She appreciates the cross-collaborative role nonprofits can play between the government and for-profit sectors, particularly when involving crisis intervention services. Michelle Brady has been with the American Cancer Society since 2014, when she joined as a senior market manager of community engagement. Since then, she has held multiple roles within the Society's volunteer engagement department and currently serves as the organization's volunteer engagement manager. Her focus is to grow the Society's already expansive volunteer base and support staff with identifying and adopting innovative volunteer roles. Dezarie Mayers is the senior manager for colleague community engagement with Pfizer. Boy, we have a lot to be grateful for when it comes to vaccines and Pfizer. Dezarie is an accomplished professional with proven success in the strategic development and execution of employee engagement and corporate responsibility programs. She leads day-to-day operations and implementation of the Pfizer colleague community engagement portfolio, including the giving and volunteering activities globally. Dezarie is a veteran of the Armed Services, where she served 8 years in the United States Army Reserves, including 6 months in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia during the Persian Gulf War, Desert Storm, and Desert Shield. She is a recipient of numerous Army Commendation Awards. Thank you for your service, Dezarie. Dan Kamins is the Director of Employee Engagement and Volunteerism with MetLife Foundation. He joined the MetLife Foundation in November 2017. In his role, Dan is responsible for growing MetLife volunteerism by increasing outreach to global employees and building infrastructure, including enhancing data collection, building a volunteer platform, and developing engagement communities. Can I get a round of silent applause for this amazing group? Just a quick side note, I would remind everyone in attendance that our panelists are graciously volunteering their time and insights today. Should you have any questions at the conclusion of today's presentation that have not been addressed, please reach out to CHC instead of contacting any of our panelists directly, and our team will work to get answers for you. Well, let's get started. So we're going to go back in time for a moment. Remember 2019? I want to provide our panelists the opportunity to share more about their organizations, along with how their volunteer programs looked in December 2019, prior to the announcement of the first COVID patient in the US, and what they look like today. So let's begin with Dan.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. And honestly, I don't remember 2019. I don't think it existed. But if I think back to where we were, where MetLife was as a company, we were just wrapping up our most successful year of employee engagement and volunteerism I think that we had ever had. We had reliable programs. We had name recognition with specific nonprofit partners and projects. We were really building a strong foundation around the work that we were doing from a nonprofit engagement and volunteerism perspective. We just finished our largest pro bono project ever. And we were really excited about where we were going to go with that in 2020. And then it all changed. And we essentially did a complete 180. And now everything that we do is virtual. There is no more in person in any of our 47 countries. We are doing a lot more flying the plane while we build it than we ever used to do. So where all of that kind of name recognition of nonprofit partners was, and all those recognizable events that we used to do were coming up, and people were excited for them year over year, month over month, whatever they were, those are all gone. And we had to essentially start over. So that's kind of why I don't remember 2019, and why hopefully 2019 can be something that comes back soon.
Yeah, I'll jump into that, Dan. I think when you said we've been learning to build the plane and fly at the same time, that was such a great analogy. I think we can all agree that we've been feeling that the last year or so. 2019, wow. We at the American Cancer Society were having some of our biggest events, not just participation-wise, but volunteer-wise. And we were really building our volunteer force, not just in numbers, but even in the autonomy our volunteers were having. So not just being someone who passes out water bottles at a walk event, but being a part of that planning committee for 12 months. And so we really were getting to a point where we were kind of mirroring these volunteer leadership committees for all of our in-person events. We were building our transportation service, which was volunteer-led, so driving cancer patients to their treatment appointments. In the Southeast region alone, we recruited over 1,000 new drivers in 2019. And so we were really building on this momentum. We were building our new online volunteer community platform. So really engaging volunteers in a very easy click-through kind of way to sign up for volunteer opportunities. And then from one day to another, kind of shut all those opportunities down. And likewise, like what you've said, we haven't been able to reopen any of our in-person opportunities. We've had literally handful of exceptions across the country for a few specific projects. And other than that, there's been no kind of face-to-face contact.
Great, thank you for sharing, Michelle. Veronica, I would love to hear from you.
Well, first, thank you for having me. The Epilepsy Foundation is a nonprofit focused on offering services and programs for people who live with epilepsy, as well as their families and friends. And just to get away from the myth and the stigmas of what seizures are like, we offer help in areas of advocacy on federal and state levels, seizure first aid, just different areas. I don't want to take up too much time, but a lot of different areas. And to go back to what Dan and Michelle just said, our volunteer program was extremely different in 2019 because majority of how people worked with us was face-to-face. Many of our events, such as our walks, our support groups, those things, people came together because they wanted to realize they are not the only person in those situations. So now our volunteer programs are completely different. Almost everything is virtual, but we have learned that it's almost taken the total opposite effect that we thought would happen, because so many more people are available to participate. And it's really been quite thankful to see how much this has helped many people. And I mean, we're not happy that happened, but we're really glad to see that so many more people are seeing this in a much better way and have more access as well. Because I mean, people with epilepsy aren't able to drive, so they may not have been able to come to different events or support groups, other types of events.
Great. Thank you, Veronica. Dezarie, tell us more about Pfizer.
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I agree with Dan. 2019 seems so long ago, and things have changed significantly since then. So in 2019, for Pfizer, we supported a lot of Dollars for Doers program, team volunteer programs. Colleagues were really going out and doing those, participating in those hands-on volunteer opportunities, and limited virtual opportunities, of course. But of course, with the pandemic, we've pivoted. Now, I can say that we have been on a little bit of a journey. And while we can all agree that 2020 was disruptive, it gave us an opportunity to reflect on how collectively we engage our colleagues, and most importantly, local communities where we live, work, and beyond. One of the things that we did, in addition to pivoting to virtual volunteer opportunities, was to conduct focus groups and survey our colleagues to understand how to best support their giving journey. Through this, we learned that colleagues were at different ends of the spectrum in terms of the giving journey, and any new program development would require renewed focus on 4 key things: inform, inspire, connect, and engage. And to break that down quickly, inform those who had never used the program, inspire those who knew about the program but never participated, connect those who participated and are open to new giving opportunities, and of course, engage those passionate colleagues who give on a regular basis. So with this information, we were able to launch and promote Give Forward, which is Pfizer's newly minted, reimagined colleague community engagement program with a new vendor, new comm strategy focused on giving time, money, and expertise. So a key priority was around awareness, and how we solved for that was we launched an influencer network. The influencer network is a list of colleagues identified by site, business leaders, including colleague resource groups, to serve as ambassadors. And what our program looks like today is that we have launched the Pfizer Foundation Volunteer Rewards Program, supporting colleagues by the hour at $20 per hour, up to $1,000 annually. And a key feature of this approach is that the flexibility in allowing colleagues to deploy those dollars earned at any point in the calendar year to any charitable organization. So whether they're volunteering at an on-site when we open back up, of course, activity, or they're on a board of a local charity, you can earn dollars. And I'm sure we're going to get to this with the with National Volunteer Week coming up starting this weekend. We're offering a double match campaign and using our influencers to really get the word out to our colleagues, to create that excitement and that buzz that is so needed to create impact in our local communities.
Great, thank you, Dezarie. Jordan, what about Ronald McDonald House Charities?
Well, thank you for bringing us all together. And we just can't say enough as well about all the corporations who flexed right along with the nonprofits during this time. Michelle spoke to really the momentum of the last couple years going into the pandemic, 2018, 2019, momentum around events, momentum around engagement. third-party community fundraising was also at an all-time high for Ronald McDonald House, 150 events. And in-house on our 4 Twin Cities sites through 2018 and 2019, we welcomed over 9,000 volunteers supporting our meal program, so families could have a warm dinner, brunch on the weekend served by volunteer groups. And of course, with the pandemic, serving families with immune-compromised children, we had a pretty striking pause, similar to Michelle's comment, a handful of exceptions now. So we went from 74,000 hours of volunteer time, the equivalent of 30, 35 full-time staff, to just a few hours a week. The beauty was exactly what others have touched on. It created a great engagement opportunity. Our gala, for example, where we would welcome 100 volunteers to help us raise a lot of money in one night for families, was something we could invite everyone to. Everyone who's ever had a heart in our mission. And that program was viewed virtually over 8,000 times. We were able to bring companies together to do things like an online silent auction. We've got the technology, they have the employees at home willing to create connections with their colleagues. So we saw some incredible engagement across companies, despite that reality of not being able to bring volunteers on site. The number one thing I would say for our organization and our staff, and the number one thing I'm most proud of, is we decided we really needed to reach out and not be shy about what we needed. That was especially important for our chapter because the volunteers would come on site and serve families, bringing ingredients to serve the meals. And if they weren't coming on site, we really needed to create a model of engagement where we asked for monetary support, wish list drives, some of these other efforts that could still deliver, especially since we needed to expand our services to families. Hospital cafeterias were closed, access to grocery stores needed to be limited to ensure families limited their exposure, of course, to COVID-19. So it's a big umbrella, a swoop of the last, 14 months, but I think we have very common themes across nonprofit challenges, but also the opportunities.
Great, thank you, Jordan, for sharing. Michelle, what were the most challenging changes that needed to take place to engage volunteers over the past year?
Yeah, great question. Thank you, Sarah. So I think for us, one of the biggest challenges, similar to something that Jordan just hit on, was the health and safety of our volunteers, our participants, patients that we interacted with. We were very aware last March, when there was so much uncertainty around COVID-19, that we were dealing with an already immunocompromised audience, right? So most of the folks that engage with us as a volunteer, as a constituent, as someone who we're able to serve through our volunteer programs, they're immunocompromised outside of a global pandemic. So then throw in kind of all the unknown health measures, health precautions, safety precautions that we knew right away was the first kind of hurdle that we would have to overcome. Was really just making sure that we were being very honest with our public. And so I think that was something that we really tried to figure out, what's the best way to do that, what messaging do we want to put together, and quite frankly, keeping that communication constant, even though we always didn't have an update, right? So making sure that we're engaging with those folks virtually, of course. So making sure that we were doing a lot more emails, phone calls. In the past we would have done mailings, but we were kind of hit with a financial obstacle of that, where it costs a lot of money to print and ship out materials. but our staff also weren't in offices. Everyone was working from home. So you kind of have that roadblock. So making sure that we're still communicating to everyone that we used to reach, but in these new modes of communication, and just making sure that we're giving them updates that are valuable, even if we still don't quite know what we're doing in 2 weeks from now, right? And so I think that's been something that we've really been still trying to kind of overcome, but I think it's been really nice. I think someone mentioned earlier just kind of how flexible our audience has been with us. I think that's just been a common theme. So in the past, where someone might have been frustrated that, you know, this staff partner always emails out their updates, a lot of people have been pretty email savvy in the last few months. So I think that's something that we've really appreciated from our volunteer force as well, is just kind of the flexibility and the grace that they've been giving us in kind of navigating some of these new challenges.
Great, thank you, Michelle. You know, I think Dezarie brought up kind of the optimal word for 2020, which was pivot, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we all shared that need to pivot. And so, Dan, in speaking about pivoting, how do you and did you empower and motivate employees to get engaged?
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a few things, and I think part of it goes to what Michelle was just talking about as well from the corporate side, right? So finding time to volunteer when you're home. I mean, I'm in a small apartment in Brooklyn, and I'm looking out at my 4-year-old and my 4-month-old, who are right over there, and thankfully not that loud at the moment, although you might hear them any second now that I said that. But then also how you find time to have that conversation with your manager when you're working from home. And I think a lot of people have the faulty assumption that if you're not working 9 to 5 or 9 to 8 or whatever the hours might be, that you're not that busy and you're not actually carrying your weight. So it's kind of empowering our employees to not only say that they want to do this because it's important for their morale and it's important for their team building, it's what they would be doing if they were in the office anyway, but also kind of letting them know that it's okay to volunteer and it's okay to want to have a little bit of flexibility in your day. And then I think beyond that, we have tried to find creative ways to make our volunteerism, even though it's all virtual, into a team effort that's led from senior management or led by an event management team, where there's competitions within volunteer opportunities, there's different ways to get engaged. We've been leveraging influencers or voices internally as much as we can. And as hokey as it is, we've been creating campaigns. So we did an at-home service initiative where we partnered with 4 nonprofits, and we were dealing with all the logistical nightmares, both from a mailing and an IT perspective of getting things to people's houses, but we did it and we got thousands of people engaged and thousands of hours done. And we'll continue to do that as much as we can, because we know that this is something that our employees want and that they really kind of true back to as a value of the company and a value of their team. So when we have the opportunity to give them a way to volunteer, we have to do it.
Great, thank you, Dan. So Veronica, how did and really how does innovation play a role with engaging volunteers?
Innovation plays a major issue with getting volunteers. For example, Volunteer 365, the Epilepsy Foundation has a partnership with CHC. So basically, I will post our virtual events on the platform, and the public learns about what we're doing, about many of our events that they wouldn't already know about. So it brings more people to participate in our events, and once they realize what we are about, what we're doing, it allows them to learn more and be more interested about other services, other programs, and want to volunteer and participate in those as well. So it's been extremely helpful. And as more people participate, many people also want to become donors. So it's really, the innovation has been very helpful, and I'm thankful for it, because more and more people are learning, and it's not just education about epilepsy, but it's also spreading awareness to their other friends, their families. For example, our seizure first aid training. We are now at the point where we're not only just training the public, we're now training staff from grocery stores, staff from private companies. It's growing so much because people realize, oh, I didn't know this. Okay, I need to teach the people who are around me. We don't know if someone who works here has epilepsy. We all need to know. We need to be certified.
That's a great point, Veronica. I think, technology played an integral role to our survival in 2020, and certainly those technology tools are key to communicating and spreading the word. So thank you for sharing. So Dezarie, how are you leveraging volunteering to create impactful community partnerships?
Thanks for the question. I think one of the things that we're certainly doing is empowering our colleagues. So we refer to our colleagues, to our employees as colleagues. Is that empowerment piece is critical for them to, one, leverage the relationship that they have with their local nonprofit organization, if they're participating on a regular basis with them. We have, with our new platform, have the ability for users to create volunteer opportunities on the platform and then share those with fellow colleagues, be it in CRG, or colleague resource group, or a department division, and so on. This then brings everyone together for team building activity, creates awareness for that nonprofit organization. The other piece that I wanted to touch on is the flexibility that our colleagues have in volunteering. And as a number of panelists have touched on before, creating that space for our colleagues to volunteer without being too prescriptive. So with with the virtual volunteer opportunities, we are encouraging colleagues to just go out, find opportunities. And one way of doing that is CHC has curated volunteer opportunities. So we're sharing that link with our colleagues for them to identify volunteer opportunities that are out there, because I can't do that. And in addition to CHC's curated information, we are also sharing Points of Light Engage, which is another wealth of information that colleagues can engage. So for those individuals who are looking to create impact in their local communities and are unsure where to start, this is a starting point by providing those curated links for them to have that impact from a volunteer's perspective, as well as from a giving perspective, because there is that journey. You start as a volunteer and then increases that opportunity to become a donor to that organization.
Great, thank you, Dezarie, for sharing your insight. So I have a question, and I hate to put the panel on the spot, but I think they're up for it. I would like you all to share with everyone what 1 or 2 words describe volunteerism to you in the upcoming months and years. So we used pivot as a word, right? Any other words that come to mind when we're looking at moving forward?
I'll jump in, Sarah. So I think for me, and kind of something that we've really been trying to promote within the American Cancer Society is empowering our volunteers. So I would say just empowering them to really, everyone has a why as to why they decide to get involved with our mission, and to really lean into that why and run with it. And so to feel empowered as a volunteer to not just help out, in a very episodic way, or kind of feel boxed into a specific job or role, but to really lean into that, grow whatever it is that they're working on, grow that initiative, invite more folks from their community into that, and then even see, hey, this is something really successful, worked in my backyard. How can I share this so that more folks like me can get involved in this capacity? So we've really been trying to just empower our volunteers, one, to make the most out of their experience, but also truthfully, I mean, to be completely honest, from a nonprofit standpoint, you know, we've had to, you know, say goodbye to a lot of staff for financial reasons and really just cut back on what we're able to do as staff, just for the sheer size of the organization from what we've become in the last year. So we really are leaning into those volunteers to help accomplish our mission and continue the work. And so to do that, we really do need to empower them with those tools and just believe that they can kind of help us in this mission.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Any other words that you can think of?
Impactful.
Go ahead, Veronica.
My word would be growth, and that is partially what Michelle was saying. We have had to change the number of staff, but the Epilepsy Foundation has also been growing our number of volunteer programs that are completely virtual, and it's based in different areas. So some are focused on advocacy, some are focused more, and that's for adults because we already have one for teenagers, but also one that is more for kids, and it's more streaming games. So it gives they learn more about epilepsy, but in a fun way, and it grows the number of volunteers, but you're still learning and you're still reaching out to other people and spreading awareness at the same time. So it's working in multiple ways.
Great, and I know Jordan wanted to weigh in as well.
Yeah, I would say every bit, trying to get it down to just one or two words, every bit of time, every bit of talent, every bit of treasure, whether it's monetary or in our case, one pound bag of shredded cheese, it really matters. And I know that sentiment holds true across all nonprofits. On staff, we get to see the impact of the time, talent, the treasures given. And especially right now, we're always a tiny but mighty crew here at Ronald McDonald House Charities Upper Midwest, but more than ever, we see the effects of our community coming to nonprofit side, whether that's feeding families, sheltering the homeless. I would say looking ahead, all of the gifts given will continue to be a part of that reinvention, the new normal. Pieces of 2019 will come back and some of the magic of 2020 will stay with us.
Great, and Dan, go ahead.
Sure. So I think for me, the word that I would throw out there is just collaborative. I think at the beginning of the pandemic, we heard from a lot of our nonprofit partners, they were not ready for volunteers. They were not ready for volunteers, and they were just trying to figure out what was going on a day-to-day basis. And we heard that and we backed off and we said, when you're ready, you come to us. And at the same time, we've been able to build internal partnerships and even partnerships with other companies where we're volunteering with them hand in hand doing co-sponsored events that now are meeting the needs from an infrastructure perspective of our nonprofit partners. And I think without that collaboration, we would be asking nonprofit partners to do things that they're not comfortable with or ready for. We'd be asking employees to do things that they just aren't that into. And if we don't have that collaboration, we kind of will swing and miss on all of these things going forward.
Great, thank you, Dan. So this is awesome, and I think we could probably go on for another 45 minutes, but I did want to open things up for questions. So I'd like to invite you to ask questions of the panelists. Please place your questions in the Q&A box. That's where we're placing them, Lacey, in a Q&A box. So we have one question. Would love to hear about the most successful virtual events. Like Veronica shared, some virtual events have expanded access.
The particular event that I was talking about is the seizure first aid training. Now, this particular virtual event happens twice a month, and so far on that I have listed is through May, but it will continue, and I'll be updating the post. But it's completely free, and it is about 75 minutes. And once you get past it, you are certified for 2 years. And it starts with a pre-test, the training, and a post-test, and that's basically to see what you've learned from the pre-test. But it's very helpful. I've taken it, and there's a lot to learn, but it's layman's terms, so it's easy to understand.
Great, thank you, Veronica. And while we're teeing up additional questions, everybody on the call has been invited to share their own words, their own single word that kind of defines the future of volunteering. So feel free to put those in the chat. Let me go to our next question. And this one is for Dezarie and Dan. What is the best way to share volunteer opportunities with your teams as we move towards restarting our in-person volunteer programs?
So I think that I would be cautious of who you go to. So I don't know that you want to share it specifically with me if you're not an existing partner, right? But I think that you do want to go to your existing partners that you're already working with and say to them, like I said before, be collaborative, be transparent with them, and say, we're getting started, we're bringing people back to the office, we're bringing volunteerism back in person, whatever it might be, and just be clear with what you're hoping to get out of it and what you're looking for from that. I think for us, we're not really looking to take on new partners at the moment because we're still trying to help our existing partners get to where they need to be from a COVID perspective, get our volunteers back engaged, and really to build on some of the new things that we've been able to do around virtual, which, like many of the panelists have said, was never an option before. But I would encourage you to work with those that you typically do work with. And like I said, just be honest with them about what your needs are.
Great, thank you.
Right, and to add to that, one thing that I would say is to, if you have a relationship with a current Pfizer employee, maybe share with them what those volunteer opportunities are, so that they too can create it within our system in order to bring visibility to some of those opportunities. It is challenging with, over 1 million nonprofit organizations across the country, needing volunteers, and it's like a little bit of a floodgate once we open things up. But I would encourage you to continue to do that. And, if you have resources such as, the curated list from CHC, that is also another way to get your volunteer opportunities, get visibility to not just Pfizer, but to companies with relationship with CHC.
Thank you, Dezarie. So we have a number of questions in the queue, and we've got about 5 minutes left on our call. So I'm going to try to get to all of these as quickly as I can. This question is for our nonprofit panelists, and it's how much of your services can actually be supported virtually? And also, what are your pain points that you feel by society now expecting so many virtual opportunities that may not actually be needed? So if I could have one of our partners from the nonprofit sector respond to that. Michelle, you're smiling.
Sure. I'm just thinking that was a lot in one question. So I think that, how many of our opportunities can actually be provided virtually? What we've learned is that, outside of our patient serving volunteer roles, we have been able to kind of pivot to a virtual platform. So a lot of our volunteers that helps, we have a really large, beautiful army of advocacy volunteers. And so whereas before, we would have quarterly, annual kind of advocacy lobby days in state capitals, national capitals, right now we've kind of transitioned all that work to be fully remote, fully virtual, and we honestly really haven't skipped a beat. So that's one area where we've really been able to see a lot of success. And even with our event planning, we're just not doing those in-person kind of planning committee meetings anymore. That's all gone virtual. And then, you know, some events we are hoping to have in person later this fall. But we had a couple, you know, contact-free, socially distant events that the whole planning process was virtual. And then maybe we did something at like a drive-in movie theater, right? Or a drive-through kind of a walk where no one got outside their cars. And so we were still kind of within those socially distant safety parameters. But again, the planning process was still very virtual. So I would say in that kind of aspect, we had a lot of success, but unfortunately, you know, we're still trying to figure out how to reopen our patient serving opportunities, again, to not compromise anyone from a health perspective. And then the second part, you know, we really are, I guess one of the kind of good things, and this has been touched on a couple of times, is virtual opportunities was something that was on our radar pre-pandemic. It just never had, you know, the fire under it that COVID kind of brought on. And so it was something that we were exploring from an innovation standpoint of, you know, how can people engage with us as volunteers without having to physically show up at a walk or volunteer in an office. So I think the need and the idea of those type of volunteer opportunities have always been there. I think for us, it's really just continuing to push ourselves as staff in terms of creating new and innovative roles. So I think we've already kind of been forced into this new platform, but now let's think of new roles. So whether it's a very episodic kind of a volunteer job or something that's very skills-based, so it kind of plays on an individual's, you know, background in technology or communications, and really just helping us kind of, like I always tell staff, you know, what's something on your to-do list that a volunteer can do for you, right? So that's kind of something that I think I don't think it'll be a pain point. It'll just be kind of seeing, you know, how can we keep being innovative?
Absolutely. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing. We have a number of questions in the queue that we are going to address when we do our follow-up with you. So we'll make sure that we get all the questions answered. But at this time, I'd like to invite my colleague, Lacey White, to share some CHC National Volunteer Month updates.
Hey everyone, we are going to bring back up our slides so that we can share with you all of the activities that CHC is hosting in celebration of National Volunteer Month. So I wanted to thank all of our panelists for providing their expert insights on workplace volunteerism and transition the conversation to how CHC can help you turn their advice into action this month. So we are celebrating National Volunteer Month by allowing and encouraging our company and municipality partners to host a curated volunteer project that aligns with their community engagement goals. And our hope is that by hosting a collaborative project, we're making it easy for all stakeholders by utilizing our volunteer platform, Volunteer Matters 365, and providing you with a marketing kit that includes email templates and graphics. But most importantly, at the end of the month, we will be communicating and sharing the positive community impact we're all making together. So really joining us for the pitch-in package is joining us for a full service volunteer experience for your workplace, your employees, and your nonprofit staff. In addition to the curated project options, we are also hosting 4 signature volunteer opportunities that Dezarie mentioned earlier. And we encourage you to share all of these opportunities with your networks. They are open to anyone and everyone. So like Dezarie said, that some companies are providing matches for volunteering next week. And all 4 of these opportunities can be completed next week, aligning with National Volunteer Week. And these projects support causes like veterans, the environment, mental health, and children. And all options can be completed virtually or at your own pace, like planting a tree with the Arbor Day Foundation. And all 4 opportunities also support current CHC nonprofit partners. Our last initiative for National Volunteer Month is actually hosting a nationwide mental health break. So something we probably all need on April 28th, we will be coming together with NAMI Minnesota So we know that personal and employee mental health has and will continue to be a priority as we move forward. So joining us to learn why we have experienced greater stress and fatigue this past year. And most importantly, this is an interactive webinar that showcases how everyone can partner with CHC for educational, health, and awareness building engagements that can strengthen your workplace culture and donor interactions for our nonprofit partners. And I just wanted to mention that exchange presentations just like today are hosted each month as a benefit for our nonprofit partners. Today's exchange was a little more special to everyone because it was our very first collaborative presentation, inviting our corporate, municipality, and nonprofit partners together in one arena to share about advice for volunteering in the future. With our nonprofit partners coming up in May, we'll be discussing storytelling for workplace giving campaigns, and in June, we'll be discussing preparing marketing resources. If anyone on this presentation today would like to attend the upcoming presentations, please feel free to reach out for more information. And in closing, we just want to thank you all for joining us today to kick off our National Volunteer Month celebration. And remember, if you have any questions for CHC or our guest panelists, please reach out to Sarah or myself moving forward.
And remember, don't hang up because you'll be directed to a short 5-question survey, and we do value your opinion. And thank you again to all our panelists and to each of you for joining us today. Have a great afternoon.